Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel where today we are going to be talking about my favorite worlds. So I love world building, and there is nothing that makes me happier than a very well thought out, interesting world. I love being immersed in them. It makes me so happy to see somebody put so much thought into this alternate universe kind of thing. And today we're going to be talking about my favorites. Now, clearly this is something that I love, and honestly, if you get me going, I could probably talk about my favorite worlds for far too long. And so I'm going to try to rein it in and basically give you a general outline of the world itself and then why I love it so much. And I will be going in reverse order. These are my top 5, and it is obviously from number 5 up to number 1. And we are going to start with Cinder by Marissa Meyer. This is the first book in the Lunar Chronicles series. Of course, I recommend the whole series, but at least start with Cinder. Obviously, this is also something that has generally been pretty popular, so a lot of people know about it. But in case you don't, this is a retelling of Cinderella. We are multiple hundreds of years in the future, so it is science fiction. Our main character of Cinder is a cyborg. She's got some really fun mechanical parts, which means that she is ostracized, but it also allows her to do her job a little bit easier. She is a mechanic. And the local prince comes by because he has a very specific problem that she needs to fix for him. And then it kind of goes from there. Now, I love this world because it's such an interesting look at the future, because we're still on Earth, number one, which not all like future science fiction worlds like look at what it would be like to still be living on Earth with a huge population and all that kind of stuff. And this one does. And we still have really advanced technology, and obviously our main character of Cinder is a cyborg. So she's got some technology in her as well. But it also has like a really interesting kind of dynamic, because there is this disease that people are terrified of. When an outbreak happens, like people are terrified because so many people die from it. And then the other part that I really like about this, it's incredibly immersive, but what I also really like is that there is actually another race or species of people that live on the moon, and what they're able to do this thing that there's a scientific explanation, but it kind of feels like magic. And so I really like those fantastical elements being brought in as well and integrated in, because I just don't think it would be a Cinderella retelling without some sort of fantastical elements. And it was really, really nicely done. It was so immersive. The whole series is just excellent. So, highly recommend this one. Number 4 goes to the Hidden Legacy series by Ilona Andrews. Now, the premise of this series is that 150 or 200 years ago, something like that, there was a serum, and some people decided to take it, and either when you took it, either you died or you got magical powers. And if you had the magical powers, you could pass it on to your children, and because it is inherited. And so now we're looking present day. What would that mean our stuff looks like? What would our world look like with that kind of history with it? And it very much is like an alternate history. And so the magic users are divided up into different houses, their families. They have the power, they influence what happens in the world. We are following our main character of Nevada, who is actually a magic user but trying to fly under the radar as she does her job as a private investigator. But this is, again, a really well thought out world, a very interesting look at this. What if we had magic, like magic just happened to exist, but only in a few select individuals. It was a very realistic look at it, and different than a lot of other people have, or it took it in a different direction than a lot of people have taken it. So I just found it to be so incredibly interesting. And yes, this is a romantic kind of series, but it's a slow burn, and the fantastical storyline is just as well developed as the romantic storyline. So, highly recommend this one. And then number 3 goes to the Velveteen versus series by Shannon McGuire, which starts with Velveteen versus the Junior Super Patriots. Now, this is an interesting series because it's actually a bunch of short stories that Shannon McGuire posted up on her website, her blog maybe. I'm not entirely certain because I didn't read it there. I read it in the book form. But basically, it started on a website and then it got collected into this. There is actually 3 books in this series. I only own the first 2, which is killing me. I just can't get my hands on the 3rd book. I want to so badly though. But essentially, this is a superhero book, and we are following our main character of Velveteen, or Velma. She's actually known as Velma now, but in this world, obviously, there are superpowers and superheroes. And again, it's this very interesting look at, okay, what if we added superheroes to our world? Like, what would it legitimately look like? And in this case, there is a corporation that controls, that acquires in young individuals who have superpowers, convinces the parents basically that we can train your kid. We can help them with their superpowers. We can train them to become superheroes. Like, it would be best for everybody involved. And they take these kids and put them on these teams, but then they retain all ownership of like copyright and licensing. And so it's really just like to make money. It is such an interesting thing. And then Velma actually gets out of it when she's an adult, which has almost never happened. But she is trying to live her life, and of course it's not that easy. But it's really interesting when she talks about her time with the other Junior Super Patriots, which is what her team was, and talking about what it was like to live at the corporate headquarters, the corporation place, and be controlled by this corporation. Like, Shauna McGuire very clearly understands capitalism, understands how businesses work. I mean, it's just really, really interesting. Again, very well thought out, very immersive. And the stories themselves are compelling as well. But honestly, the world building in this is excellent. And again, I have never seen a superhero story kind of taken in this direction. And for it to be, it's so interesting and just so well done. After that, we do have Feed by Mira Grant, which is a pen name for Shannon McGuire. But with this particular pen name, she writes biomedical horror, which just means that she writes horror that is very firmly based in well-researched science. And this is her zombie apocalypse novel. Now, this is an interesting take on it because we are given a very solid explanation as to how this zombie apocalypse kind of happened. Essentially, there is a scientist who was tinkering with the virus to try to cure the common cold, and he succeeded. And there was another scientist that was tinkering with a different virus to see if he could cure cancer, and he did. But these viruses met up and became this super virus that cures the common cold and cures cancer and also raises the dead. And everybody has been exposed to this virus, so everybody has it. So whenever anybody dies, they will become a zombie. Now, the really interesting thing about this is that was at the time that this novel takes place, that apocalypse happened like 20 or 30 years prior. So now we're actually in a society who has lived through a zombie apocalypse, and it wasn't like now everything has burned down and society doesn't exist. Society very much does exist. It's just incredibly different because nobody wants to go outside. Nobody wants to gather in large groups of people because that could, like, if anybody happens to die or there's some other scientific thing that goes on. But basically, if you if you spontaneously turn into a zombie, first of all, now you're dead. Second of all, like, if the zombie is next to you, you could die too. Like, it's so, everybody is terrified of this. And so the consequences of this, again, are just incredibly well thought out. Shauna McGuire clearly understands society and how we would react to things, the good and the bad. And she has made this incredible world. It was so detailed, so immersive, so very interesting. And I think one of the most interesting things about it is, especially now as we are living through a pandemic, we are finding a lot of parallels. If you go back and read Feed, there are a lot of parallels between how her characters and how her world reacted to a pandemic and how our world is reacting to a pandemic. And so it's just, again, incredibly interesting. I love this one. So good. But my very, very favorite number one world is The World of the Others by Anne Bishop, and it starts with Written in Red. Now, in this is an urban fantasy, and I have read a lot of urban fantasies, but this has always taken the origin of the world in a very interesting direction that we don't normally see. In that she posits this idea that there was an original species, it's called like Terra Indigene. I'm probably pronouncing it terribly, but Terra Indigene, and they were here before the humans, and they ended up spawning off different kind of subspecies like the vampires and the werewolves, but the original Terra Indigene still live. But more interestingly is they don't need humans for anything. They don't need them. They feed on them because it's there, the humans are there, but they don't need the humans for food really, and they don't need it for they don't need the humans for reproduction. So there's no reason to keep them alive other than, like, okay, maybe it would be rude to like kill all the humans. And so they don't do it. But the humans are not the big bad apex predator. These people, the Terra Indigene are. And moreover, there are far more Terra Indigene than there are humans. And so going with that premise, which is just hugely different than any, like, it's every single other urban fantasy I've read, it's always that even though like vampires are super strong and super fast and like just basically super powered, they still are reliant on humans because they drink their blood, for example. And so again, this is the first time where it's been posited where like the vampires, werewolves, Terra Indigene are not reliant on the humans for anything. And so it just creates this really, really interesting world. And again, Anne Bishop is really good at asking, okay, so if that's how it is, then what would the results be? How would the world be different? And she did a great job with this. And in this, we are following our main character of Meg, and she is a blood prophet. Essentially, when her skin is cut in any way, she can see visions of the future. And now she has escaped from people who would use her ability for their own personal gain and is trying to figure out how to live her life without also getting sent back to this compound. It is a very interesting series. Obviously, that means there are trigger warnings for cutting. Really big trigger warnings, guys. But there's also a trigger warning for rape. Not explicit scenes, but it is made clear that it has happened in the past, and Meg very clearly suffers from some PTSD. So just a heads up. But the world itself is phenomenal. It is just so good. Again, so well thought out, so original in a genre that has a ton of books that just seem to follow the same thing. Like, this is a standout because it is so original. So there you go, you guys. my top 5 worlds that I find to be so incredibly immersive and just interesting and different, and I love them so much. And if you guys have read them, please let me know down below. Come talk with me about them. If you haven't, let me know if you're interested in reading them. Did this pique your interest? I hope so. But that's it, you guys. So until next time, have happy reading, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.